Hey everybody, welcome again to What's Up, No Learn Fly, right here from AOPA headquarters and places unseen. Today's episode is Give Up Your Day Job. Notice the don'ts crossed out. What's it like to work in aviation? So we are really happy to be here today. We've got some special guests with us too, with a wealth of experience. And so let's get this thing started. But as we always do, don't forget, we got to go through some basic controls for everybody out there just to make sure in case you're new. If you are on a PC, then you've got a control panel that looks something like this. And if you'd like to ask a question, which we'd love you to do, just type your question in the box and then make sure you hit the send button. And you'd find that looking for that little like cartoon bubble thing with a question mark in it. But make sure you hit that send button, otherwise we won't see it. If you're on a tablet, it'll look something like in the lower left-hand corner over here. Look for the question mark right here, type in your question and click that send button, and that way we'll make sure we see it. All right, as always, my name's Chris Moser. I'm here with you from AOPA. I work here to support CFIs and flight schools. And quick little plug, our Flight Training Experience Awards are currently open. So if you know of a good school or instructor that you think deserves an award, let them know and just tell them to go to aopa.org/FT awards. Am I right with that, Stephen, or is it FTE? Am I mistaken?
FT Awards.
FT Awards. Okay, check it out. You can also go to the flight schools link as well. So check it out. All right. And I'm joined by one of our favorite people, Dan.
What a nice intro that was, Chris. Thank you. I am thrilled to be your favorite. So happy to be here. Dan Justman, Vice President of You Can Fly. I am thrilled and honored and privileged to be able to lead the You Can Fly programs, the high school flight training flying clubs, Rusty Pilots initiatives, and the teams and programs. There is nothing better than getting to support and grow general aviation. And with that, would like to pass on the baton to special guest, the AOPA Foundation Vice President, Katie Pribyl.
Good morning. Well, it's morning where I live. I'm coming to you from Montana. I've been with the AOPA since 2012 in various roles, from communications to You Can Fly, now to AOPA Foundation. ATP flight instructor, and I'm a proud owner of a Cessna 180. And I say manager of the reverse 5-bar-M airstrip. That does exist. I mean, literally my airplane is about the only one that uses it, but it's a very important airplane. I punch cattle some days, and I say my most capable airplane is the CRJ 200, although I could have a very healthy debate with you about its real capabilities, or lack thereof. But the most fun I have ever had in an airplane is on a Super Cub on amphibs, followed closely by a Carbon Cub this summer. In the backcountry of Montana, but of course, you know, my 180, I'm pretty partial to him. So
very cool.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to talk about careers, something I really care a lot about.
Love it. Awesome. And then next up, Brian Macbean. Brian is director with AOPA Aviation Finance. Brian, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, excited to chat about some of the things we can do in aviation that isn't necessarily all about flying, although flying is one of the more fun parts, I think. I've been with AOPA now for, what's it been, just over 11 years, so since 2013, and I'm currently the kind of running the finance and credit side of things for our aviation finance brokerage. We have a nationwide brokerage to help people find financing options for buying their aircraft, upgrading their aircraft, overhauling engines, those sorts of things. We've got lots of options we can help people do, and happy to help people. Happy to be here to talk about what else we can do.
Awesome, thank you, Brian. And of course, as always, behind the scenes, unseen, our favorite hidden guy, Stephen Schroeder. Say hello, Stephen.
Hello, Stephen.
Love it. Every time.
Every time, yeah.
Every coordinator with our flight training initiative. I work directly with Chris and Dan, producer on the webinar programs, manager of our training awards program, which is open, as Chris mentioned, and just living the best life. Happy to be here.
Awesome.
Very cool.
All right, Dan.
Yeah, so everything that the You Can Fly programs and the teams do is funded by generous donations made to the AOPA Foundation. So if you are partial to the What's Up, No Learn Fly podcasts, webinar, what are we? We're not really a podcast, are we? We're a webinar. That could be podcasted later, I guess. But if you like this content, it helps you out as flying, you want to support, we would love love to partner with you on that. Please go to aopafoundation.org to help support the foundation and help us support and grow general aviation. And with that, we have not yet seen the questions that always come up, but is there wings credit for this webinar? Yes, in fact, there is, but only if you're viewing the live broadcast. If you have registered with your FAAsafety.gov email address, nothing more that you'll need to do. We're all set. If you're not sure or have not registered with that email address that's on record with FAAsafety.gov, please email us at ftinitiative@aopa.org and we will get you all squared away. Nothing more you need to do than make sure that we have that email address. We'll take care of the rest in a couple days' time. You'll see that wings credit show up on your FAAsafety.gov account. We are recording this webinar, so if there's anything that you see or hear that you weren't quite sure of or you'd like to get reinforced, you're able to go back and view that again. We're on YouTube, AOPA Pilot Video. We have updated the link there with What's Up playlist, so you can find it there, and also webinars.aopa.org. That one's not yet been updated, but it will shortly, but you can find it under the Don't Get Rusty playlist there, webinars.aopa.org. Now, I'm wondering if there's anything that we have not yet mentioned. Stephen, did we mention?
Did you know on this day in 1928, the first diesel engine to power a heavier than air aircraft was used? There's a bunch of interesting write-ups where I guess they converted the plane that it went into to see if it would work and able to find the efficiency of a diesel engine. So that's fascinating read. And then I believe the very next day, is it a Wilbur or Wright? One of the Orville brothers.
One of the the Wright brothers.
One of the Wright brothers was able to make a much longer flight. I think he made like 3 circuits in his one of his airplane designs too. So a lot of busy aviation history going on this couple of days.
Very cool. All right. Well, hey, let's get to our topic for today. So today we're doing something a little bit different. Normally we would talk about proficiency or different types of operations and things like that. But this month we wanted to talk a little bit about just the idea of working in aviation. And the key part really is that there are a ton of aviation careers. In fact, in the handout, you will find this FAA document in there, and it will list a bunch of aviation careers. But we solicited folks that we know, and even to our audience as well, people that submitted. We have 21 different careers that we're going to talk about, but that's just scratching the surface. As I know Katie and Brian both, we discussed this before. There are a ton of them. So what we're going to do today is get a really quick insider view of working in aviation. All three of us, actually all of us here obviously do work in aviation. So we'll share some of that, and we want to find out about some of the qualifications, challenges, etc. The other thing that I want to do today too is I want you to watch for a theme, because as I was going through these and pulling all these out, there seemed to be a theme that or several themes that pulled out among these careers that will tie back together to get to our wings part at the very end. So let's get started. The first career of our 21 is aviation finance. So Brian, I'm going to throw it to you.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And this is one that I'm particularly passionate about because it's what I do, and I've been doing it for the last 11 years or so. And it's really interesting because working in aviation finance, like I mentioned early on when I did my intro, I'm not necessarily in an airplane all the time, but I do get to talk about airplanes a lot, which is a lot of fun. And so what we do in aviation finance in terms of what AOPA does, we run a brokerage and we help people find financing options. But there are lots of other different ways that you can be involved in finance in terms of being on the actual lending side. You can be on the finding side. You can be on the on the financing side, those sorts of things. And so what we'll do is we'll help people line up their particular aircraft and find good financing options with them. One of the best things about it is helping people fulfill their dream of buying and owning an airplane. There's nothing better than that. And some of the tough things that are kind of about it, we don't always get to say yes. We do that as best as we can, as often as we can. But there are, it is real life, so sometimes not everything is nice and pretty like that. But in terms of getting prepared for something like this, education is important and experience. So a background in some sort of related financing field or an understanding of finance and business is usually something that'll be very helpful.
Very cool. Thanks, Brian. And of course, we were just teasing beforehand as well. Well, not necessarily teasing, but he just gets to do a little something like make people's dreams come true. So nothing big there at all. Yeah. All right. Our next one is IT Digital Product Manager. This is actually somebody that works here at AOPA that submitted it, but it is definitely a field that goes really widespread out in aviation. What these folks do is they manage, design aviation software products. So you can think of things like ForeFlight, Garmin Pilot, or even the GPS, all the stuff that we use that's software based now in aviation. And that's what they do. In fact, here at AOPA, we had the flight planner for a long time and other various aspects of products that they make. What's cool about it? They said designing and improving apps. So if you like building stuff and coding and designing, this is the right thing. And in fact, he even said being on a patent is pretty darn cool too. I know that this was Eric, a gentleman that works here with us, and he thought that was pretty neat, which I agree. And getting to meet cool people as part of all of that. What's tough? Keeping up with the technology. It's constantly changing. You got to stay on top of it. And then, of course, staying within budget and time limits, because you always want to make it perfect, but budget and time may not always allow that. What's it take? You want to have that computer science degree. So if you've got a background like that, plus some technical certifications in various types of products, that's what you're looking for. And then, of course, knowing a little bit about business and sales would be helpful. All right, Brian, aircraft broker.
Back again. So aircraft brokers, again, involved in the buying process, right? And so if you think of an aircraft broker, it's very similar to what you might think of when you think of a real estate broker, which is another kind of broker that a lot of people are familiar with. So what they do is they help people find the right airplane that'll work for them. They're also kind of salesmen, and so they are going to help sell aircraft. They may work for a dealer or they may work independently, either one. What's cool about this is that you do get to meet a lot of new people. You see a lot of different types of airplanes as well. Depending on your situation, you may get to fly those airplanes either to the client for a review or for delivery or something like that. What's tough about that is figuring out what the client or what your buyer really needs, listening to them and solving some of their problems. There's always some give and take in aviation. And of course, finding that perfect aircraft for that person is sometimes a challenge. What's helpful in this and what's it take to get something like this, to get this kind of position? Experience. A lot of it is experience. A lot of these brokers have ownership or operational experience with aircraft. They, of course, have a passion for aviation, and they're really good at understanding and parsing through information to get the results.
And interestingly enough, on this one of the people I spoke with about this talked about they used to own a flight school, and in doing that, they got a lot of experience, and that just rolled naturally into it without them even meaning to becoming a broker as they are right now. So I thought that was kind of cool. Let me click. Oh, sorry. Back to airport manager. I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Airport manager. Hey, it's you again, Brian.
You got us all confused here, Chris. So airport manager, this is a really interesting one because it's multifaceted. There's so many different things that are involved in managing an airport. So what they do, like it says on the slide, it's very wide ranging. You deal with all sorts of different agencies and different individuals and different groups and things like that. In some cases, there's a little bit of politics involved as well, because a lot of airports are owned by municipalities. And so there's a little bit of that involved. So it's very wide ranging in terms of the experience that you'll have. Some of the fun things are completing projects, whether it's runway extensions, adding new approaches or building new hangars, those sorts of things, all sorts of different options and fun things to do to complete projects, problem solving. And then of course there are emergencies. There's a story that was told that the FAA requires emergency preparation and practice. And there was one day where they were getting everything all ready for a practice, and they actually had an emergency on the runway, and all the trucks and all the personnel were there, and they were able to get there almost before the airplane even stopped. So everybody was safe that day, but it was a really cool experience from what they said. Some of the tough things are that each individual airport is so different, and you don't always have people on your side when you're working as an airport manager. So working through some of those challenges is sometimes challenging. And an aviation degree or a business management degree is definitely helpful. There are certain other experiences that are necessary that the municipality boards may require you to have to be an airport manager.
And in fact, I remember this person saying too, is that some people think, oh, it's just a stepping stone to like a real career in aviation. They're like, no, I worked to get to this. So I remember that was really an interesting quote too. Pretty cool. And then Katie, you're an aircraft or airport manager yourself, aren't you, owning that airport on the ranch?
Well, technically, yes.
So
Yeah.
another thing to add
I
to
mean, I have a windsock, some cones, and it is on the sectional. So technically, I mean, it's official.
Oh, yeah, you are official.
MT. Check it out,
Yeah.
but you got to call me for permission first.
And you have to mow it. So
Only
you
because I need to make sure the antelope are off the runway and the cows.
All right, so this next one is flight school owner and manager, and I'm remiss in mentioning that I put sort of the topic or the category up at the top. So business and management was this first category, and I actually have the sort of the pleasure of working with lots of flight school owners and managers in my job here at AOPA. And the big thing that they do is a lot of people think that, oh, I'm a CFI, I just started flight school. But in reality, what they're doing is running a business. So flight school owners, managers, they manage the business and staff. They provide vision, and every one of them that I talk to talks about putting out fires, not literal, at least hopefully not, but a lot of things that just happen, getting tires and maintenance stuff sorted out. And every one of them says too, every day is an adventure. The other part that is consistent among the ones I talk to as well is they say it is incredibly rewarding. So it's tough, but rewarding, because helping people get across the finish line, reaching the dreams, sort of making that stuff happen, helping them reach their goals. Almost every one of them says that is why they do it, including the cool part later of seeing someone who was a student at your school flying the airline that you're now on, or some even gone on to be military pilots or even astronauts, as was mentioned here as well. I know the same person who was that broker I mentioned too said that they often have helped people overcome fears. They mentioned one time they had a mother come in with an autistic child who was going to be going on an airline flight, and they helped that child kind of get used to the airport environment and getting used to airplanes. And so again, super rewarding. What's tough? We hear the idea of they are responsible for ownership of that thing. So like running the thing, all the people that are employed there, building a solid culture is a challenge at times too. And it's just longer hours than you would think. What does it take? You want to be a good business person. That's what it really comes down to. So you want to have that kind of business acumen, and the spirit of wanting to grow that business. And you need to love people and helping them achieve those dreams. Of course, having some of that experience before that would be super helpful. All right. Again, in that business management side, we've got defense contractor. This was interesting. We had a lady who submitted one that was the CEO of a small firm, but talked about being a defense contractor. And so maybe you're into tech and developing and that sort of things. And so what the defense contractor does is she talked about learning from customers and employees about whatever problem they're trying to solve and helping them do that. And in her case, she was working in the space domain. So I would assume she didn't get specifics, maybe she wasn't able to, but the idea of maybe it was rockets, satellites, all that sort of stuff, and learning to the leading edge of what we're learning about the universe, advancing our industrial base, and really just helping grow the aerospace industry. So if you're into that kind of stuff, kind of a cool job being a contractor. Toughest part about it, she mentioned, was being getting the prime contracts. I imagine being a small firm, when you've got places like Lockheed and everything else, makes it a little more challenging. And then what does it take? Well, in her case, being the CEO, obviously leadership training, but even beyond that, if you have some STEM education, you've got that technical background, and you know some financial basics for helping run that business, that's really important. So knowing the tech part to then work with the engineers that you've got, and also with the vendors or the people that you're working with, your customers. Building relationships is really big too. And then she mentioned as well, having a military background is really helpful in being a contractor. All right, Katie.
All right, on to university alumni engagement. I am the alumni of an aviation university. I went to Embry-Riddle-Prescott, and so I really appreciate the work that alumni engagement folks do. They put together lots of events at trade shows, at air shows, the MBA convention. I'll have drinks with friends and fellow alumni at events like that. They also do perform a really important function, which is connecting alumni with students, current students. And that's valuable for a number of reasons. A lot of us alumni would like to hire those folks, and those folks also want connections to the companies and to the jobs that they want to do in the future. So it's just a really important function. I think that's served. You know, what's tough about it is probably effectively communicating and knowing and having a background in a lot of different places in the aviation industry, so you can talk to a lot of different folks who end up doing many, many different things, a lot of the things we're talking about today. What does it take? Like I said, an understanding of the industry, and being an alumni really helps as well. Something she mentioned as well is a lot of alumni have this assumption that when the alumni director comes calling, they're looking for money or donation to the university, and that's definitely not the case. Their job first and foremost is to continue building that network of alumni, which is so important and so cool. That's their job first and foremost, and I think that's something that we should all remember as alumni.
And that's, I have to say, I make that assumption too. So it's kind of interesting to take that point. The next one is, all along that same line of education and training, in this case, it was a university aviation instructor, which when I first saw this, of course, I just thought it was a flight instructor, like what I had done, but this was really cool. So you can imagine what they do. It's a classroom teacher. They teach a college course in aviation. And so this person mentioned that they do classroom teaching and preparation, so lesson planning, getting all the activities ready. Of course, grading and creating different strategies and activities for the students to do. What's cool, I can know for me personally too, I know that the really cool part is helping out students. So engaging with them, working with them in the classroom, it is incredibly rewarding. So I've really found it interesting that the flight school owners are on that same part, where that rewarding part of helping students succeed in the dream, even beyond the part of being successful in the business. What's tough about it? This was an interesting one that they said students may not grasp the commitment and grit that you need to succeed in flight training, in other words, ground school. So I think I do understand that, because sometimes you think, oh, I'm going to go flying and it's just going to be a bunch of fun, but there is some work to it. As we all know, if you've gone through your pilot certificate, there's some work to get there. You've got some studying to do and preparation, and it takes a commitment to get it all together by the end to be able to pass the check ride successfully. What do you need to work in aviation as a university instructor? You would definitely want a graduate degree, preferably in aviation. Obviously, your FAA instructor certificates is appropriate. So if you're in a flight program, a CFI, or if you're doing ground instruction, your ground instructor certificate, AGI's advanced ground instructor, or something like that. And then, of course, enthusiasm, and you want to be able to work to understand your students. So I know for me, this is definitely one that I really like a lot, and I think is very rewarding. And in fact, a lot of folks get to do that on their way even into other aviation careers. All right, here's one. Now we're going to engineering. So the engineering part of this, and this one was aerospace. And of course, we know there are a lot of types of aerospace engineers, whether they're designing things for Boeing or Lockheed Martin, et cetera. But this just happens to be, I knew an aerospace engineer, which is my uncle. He recently retired. He actually had a PhD in aerospace engineering. So he literally was a rocket scientist, because he worked on rockets and missiles. And so what he did, he was trying to encapsulate his entire 30-year career, and he talked about, and by the way, he was also went to Embry-Riddle for a bit there too. So Katie would be like, yeah, Embry-Riddle. What they do, they develop, they analyze, they flight test missile defense systems. And so he was working on, that's mainly what he did his entire career. I know he worked for JPL and that sort of thing. What's cool? The people. And I thought that was interesting. The number one thing he said was the people I got to work with, the teams that I got to be on. He liked that the most. He also really liked testing the missiles, and he both liked it when it was successful. So you see something cool, like when it worked and it worked out, but he also liked the unsuccessful test, because he found it really interesting to then figure out what went wrong and what do we do to fix it. He got to brief the Joint Chiefs of Staff, so I assume that was after some time. So that's kind of a cool thing to have happen. And then the things that are tough, having the back, balancing the technical rigor, the things, trying to get everything just right with the budgeting and schedule limits. I know we've heard that one before. So that idea of making that balance out. And he definitely said you need to have a good technical background so you can ask the right questions as you're going through the process of building and working with the other engineers, but also you need to be able to distill it down for leadership. And so being able to make that happen, so then a way that they can understand it if they don't have that technical background to make decisions. What's it take? He said at least a master's degree in engineering plus some experience, although obviously you can get more than that. All right, Brian, human factors engineering.
All right, human factors engineering. So this is one that I thought was really interesting for me personally, because I hear the term human factors and I kind of zone out or tune out a little bit because it just sounds like it's really too technical for me and not something I'm super interested in. But it actually is very interesting because it deals with how we as people interact with other things, right? And so specifically with aviation, performing evaluations on avionics. I mean, anytime we're in the pilot seat, we're playing with avionics. We're making adjustments, we're changing this, we're moving that, and we're interacting with those. They do a lot of test scenarios where they're setting up different tests in the lab and seeing how people interact and seeing how how the piece of equipment works with the interaction from the person. And then they look at those test results and evaluate, okay, well, how can we make this better? One of the things that I thought about here was a few years ago, I bought a car, and it wasn't a brand new car, it was just new to me. And as I sat in there, everything was exactly where I thought it should be, ergonomically, and where my feet were, where my hands were, where my eyes were looking, everything was in the exact right spot. And that's kind of an example of how people use human factors to study, okay, where do people think this should be? And so much of that goes into avionics, and so much of that goes into the ergonomics of an aircraft and things like that. So I kind of thought that was interesting, that this human factors idea kind of plays into all sorts of different areas. So one of the things they said was cool about this is helping improve aviation safety, and then meeting the challenges of learning all of the different things that have to go into designing something that is used in our aircraft or for servicing our aircraft, in terms of regulations and delivering things that are reliable and will work for you. Some of the tough things are interpreting those results. After you run through those tests, figuring out, okay, well, what does this actually mean? That can be kind of a challenge sometimes, and then getting people to understand what that means and how to translate that into an end result or a product. So what does it take to do something like this and to get into this kind of field? There are actually degrees that you can earn in human factors that study human interactions, knowledge of regulations, especially in the aviation industry, and then curiosity. Let's design a test and let's figure out what that test tells us, and how we can turn that into something that'll help pilots moving down the road. Of course, one of the things that helps a lot is having an understanding of pilots and what they do. So being a pilot can definitely help in this case.
Absolutely. And I think, Brian, you're up with this one too, the aviation attorney one.
Oh yes, the aviation attorney. Everybody's favorite people are attorneys, right? So this is one that, in my role as a on the financing side for aircraft purchases, we do often interact with attorneys. And one of the things that I like about the attorneys that we interact with, and especially the ones we have here at AOPA, is that their goal really is to help people. That's the goal. There are lots of nuances in the regulations and in verbiage and contracts and things like that. And so the attorneys that you work with, really their goal is to help you figure out how to get through things and interpret what it means for you specifically. So there are so many different facets of the law. And when you specialize in aviation law, you're talking about, maybe dealing with some pilot deviations, accidents, FAA infractions, medical certification, and dealing with some of the other agencies. You may be helping other attorneys that aren't as familiar with aviation law, but have an aviation case that they're working on. And then, of course, you may end up drafting comments or proposed rules or other things, either on a state or a federal level. And so having a good understanding of what those aviation regulations and requirements are helps there. Some of the things that are cool here are helping. Again, their goal is to help people, helping people successfully navigate the legal issues that they encounter in the aviation industry. There was this interesting story that Chris, you and I spoke about a little bit after while we were talking about this, and there was a time where an airliner was setting up at the end of the runway. They were doing kind of a static power takeoff and running up the engines. And what had happened was some of the asphalt had come loose, and it had the jet blast from the engines had blown it back to the aft of the aircraft, and it actually punctured the skin of the aircraft and some of the control surfaces. And they flew off. They didn't know anything about it because they were up in the cockpit. And the FAA found them and said, "Hey, by the way, you were flying an unworthy aircraft, and we're going to prosecute you for this." So the attorney that we talked to said, "I was able to be involved in that case and resolve it without having any negative impacts on the pilots or the crew, because there was no way for them to know." So again, another example of them trying to help people in aviation. What's tough is it's complicated and it's very detail oriented. You've got to get into law school, you've got to pass law school, then you've got to pass the bar exam, and you've got to be really detail detail oriented in order to understand what those regulations and things are. I mentioned what it takes in terms of getting a law degree and passing the bar exam. Being a pilot, if you're going to specialize in aviation law, is definitely going to help, and understanding how the FARs affect and how we interact with those FARs is really helpful as well.
All right, cool. Thanks, Brian. All right, the next one we've got is FAA inspector, Katie.
Well, Brian, you think everybody's most favorite job in aviation is the lawyer, but it's really the FAA safety inspector, because nobody loves it more than when that FAA guy is walking across the ramp to your airplane asking for your certificates, right?
Touche, yes.
Safety inspectors do a lot more than just check people's certificates. They investigate accidents and incidences, complaints. They do a lot of work with airlines and Part 135 operators, managing and overseeing their training programs and whatnot. So it's a lot more than just checking people's certificates. What's cool about the job? It's a government job, right? So stable pay, pretty stable schedule and lifestyle. That's really attractive to a lot of people. And another thing is you get to see pilots at their best. So you also better like to sit in the simulators. Not everybody loves a simulator, and the fire hose that is training. But safety inspectors will do a lot of that. For example, this gentleman that wrote in giving us some background on their career as a safety inspector said one of the coolest things he got to do was be the first type-rated pilot on a brand new airplane coming onto this air carrier certificate. And so he's the first pilot that goes through their designated training program, evaluating its effectiveness, and got to be the first. And then he was training everybody else and overseeing and checking everybody else going through that sim and getting online, doing the proving runs. That's super cool, right? So very varied. What does it take? It's a technical job. I mean, you got to fly a lot of different types of airplanes, be proficient and know regs, and so very technical. Be able to sit, like I said, in a hydraulic box and do lots of training, stay proficient, stay up to date on regs. And I think maybe this is the most important one. You got to be a really good communicator and ability to interact with a lot of people. Most situations are positive. They are there to help. They truly are. They're there to keep it safe. But sometimes that means, you got to be the bad guy, but eventually it pays off for the aviation industry. These guys are one of the main reasons why the US aviation system is the safest in the world. So it's a very, I think, rewarding job.
Very cool. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one, product marketing. So actually that's you as well.
Okay, I'll just keep going. So product marketing. I mean, if you're a pilot, if you own an airplane, you see a lot of marketing every day. AOPA Pilot Magazine, online. Somebody's always trying to sell you the next coolest product, gadget. There's so many of them. I want them all. Product marketing works on me all the time. Right, there you go. At AOPA, we have a lot of product marketers, right? In many cases, we're looking to differentiate the AOPA membership against others. Really cool is providing that value and communicating that value about what's important about an AOPA membership or Garmin's newest amazing autopilot, and why you should put that in your airplane, or why you should be, for example, a member of AOPA. There's a lot of regulations. We all know aviation is one of the most highly regulated forms of recreation out there if you're just doing it for fun. As a product marketer, you got to pay attention to that. You've got to make sure that you are truth in advertising, and that you're meeting in those regs and communicating really accurately. Words matter, nuances matter in products like this. What does it take? You should have a degree in marketing or business. It can also be really technical. There's a lot of math, a lot of evaluation. Building a marketing plan and then evaluating it can be pretty technical and actually scientific. So having a degree helps. And of course, good communication and problem-solving skills, being able to set a plan in motion and then be able to evaluate it and do a course correction is really important to a product marketer.
Very cool. And in fact, I was just mentioning too, there's all the ads you see like in AOPA's magazines, like here's one happens to be for the awards. Can't see that anyway, but all those ads all done by marketing and the folks that work with that. So everywhere. The next one we got is media video producer. So this is in that media sort of subject category. And what do they do? Well, these are the folks, like we have several here at AOPA, but also lots of other organizations have them too. So all those videos you see on YouTube or movies or things of that sort that have anything to do with aviation, that is a job. And so they create, they produce, they edit video content. In our case, for an aviation organization, it could be for a magazine, or it could be for the movies too. What's cool? The two gentlemen that helped us out with this today was, they were saying, it was telling the story of general aviation. They love meeting the people, they love seeing the airplanes and getting to be in the airplanes, and so they thought that was really, really cool about it. Also educating pilots. One of the gentlemen works in our Air Safety Institute and knows that the videos that he creates and works on could potentially help improve aviation safety. Never boring. One of the ones Josh actually mentioned the part about special days like the Arsenal of Democracy flyover that we had here. And even though I know it was kind of weathered out, they still were able to do a formation flight, and you got to see all these old World War II aircraft all together in a formation flight. So that was kind of cool. What's tough? Managing, notice again, managing time and resources, because if you've ever tried to edit a video like on iPad or something like that, it takes way longer than you ever would think. And so it's very time consuming. So just, and also for the folks in the Air Safety Institute, daily being deep in the details of an accident can be kind of heavy, but they definitely take the attitude of, like, we know that us doing this potentially can help people to avoid this happening in the future. So they take that as part of the job. What does it take? Helpful to have a degree in visual arts, film, communication, something like that, where you've gotten some training in how to put these things together. Proficiency in production, the better you are at it, helps with your time management as you learn the software, how to do all the different parts of it, scripting, shooting, etc. And then finally, creative problem solving and flexibility is key, because I've been there on shoots and been lucky enough to be on the other side of that, and I've seen all that happen for them to figure things out. All right, Brian, this is kind of cool, this photography one, because I know that you did this, which I had no idea.
Yeah, this is actually how I got started in aviation, was doing aerial photography. So my dad was running a photography studio, and I got my pilot's license using his airplane, and he asked me to come kind of get the aerial photography side of his business off the ground, pun intended. And so it's really interesting, really rewarding. It's a lot of fun. And there are also, besides being just an aerial photographer, so a lot of the things we were doing were taking shots of other people's projects and real estate and things like that. But there's also a lot of air-to-air stuff that you can do. And then this kind of ties in a lot with product marketing as well, like Katie talked about. Pictures tell the best stories. And so there are so many different ways that you can use photography to help tell a story, whether it's from a marketing perspective or whether it's from a business perspective, whatever it may be. So a photographer or a content producer, what you're looking to do, what they do is they're brainstorming, they're planning things out and executing those plans with aviation-based photography. So you could be in the airplane taking a picture, you could be on the ground taking a picture of the airplane or doing something else like that. It includes still photos and videos as well. And then copy editing, writing, hosting the media, all of that stuff comes into play. You've really got to be able to manage all of that, the various types of imagery that you'll get as a photographer or videographer. One of the things that they said was cool is meeting people and connecting with them around their stories. So like I said earlier, pictures tell some of the best stories. It's, pictures worth 1,000 words, right? And so if you get a really good, clean photo, you can tell a great story with something like that. What's tough about it? So I mentioned this a little bit, and this is managing the process, managing all the pictures, which picture looks best, which section of video looks best, and how are we going to determine how to use these in the end product. Working in airplanes, they tend to be fairly small. And I discovered early on in my aerial photography career that if you're hanging out the window, it doesn't lead to very good pictures. Because once you're in that slipstream, the camera isn't holding still anymore. So, you've got to be able to work within tight spaces in some cases. And then being on time, being on budget, weather is a huge thing. With aviation in general, and especially if you're doing aerial photography, there's not a lot of good pictures you can get when you're in the soup flying IFR. And so that's something that you really need to plan for. So what's it take? A degree certainly in photography, or experience or a passion in photography. Journalism experience is great. That way you can kind of visualize the end product and result. Being a pilot is always helpful in these things. And then telling the true story, being ethical and honest, is something that I think is important and that we need more of today.
Very cool. And hey guys, I know we're going relatively quickly through these. We've got about 6 or 7 more, I believe. So we're going to try to keep it in tight as we go through. So the next one is outreach and event planning, which Katie has a good bit of experience leading a team that did this.
I did. If you like to not do the same thing every day, then aviation event planning is for you. One day, I don't know, we were out there trying to figure out how to park 500 airplanes and 1,000 cars on a little GA airport. And the next day you might be negotiating an audiovisual contract for a high school teacher event. So a varied, never a dull moment. You get to be around aviation and airplanes and pilots, and a lot of cool problem solving, especially when you're doing events in non-standard places that weren't built for events and air shows and fly-ins and those sorts of things. So if you like challenges, this is the job for you. What's tough about it? You might be planning multiple events at the same time. Oftentimes there's a lot of lead time to planning an event. A fly-in, you're going to start the year before. Pretty much every event, in aviation now, you're going to be planning a year or sometimes more out. So that means you're going to be planning multiple at the same time and keeping track of all the things that need to get done. And so being very organized is really important when it comes to aviation events, making sure that all those contracts and all those logistics are taken care of and planned for. Super cool opportunities to get to see the backgrounds of places that you normally wouldn't get to, where the public can't necessarily get to. You have an opportunity oftentimes to get behind the scenes, so to speak, and see some pretty cool places and get access to some pretty cool things.
Very cool. And of course, never stressful at all in doing that job.
No stress, no stress. I mean, a major thunderstorm and you have an outside event, it's like outdoor, you're like planning an outdoor wedding,
Yeah. No problem.
week. No problem, right.
All right, we're going to keep it moving here. We've got Ag Pilot that Brian's going to talk about. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sounds good. I've got a little bit of experience with this just because I was taught how to fly by a couple of crop dusters. And so, as just to kind of clear the air, everything I learned about crop dusting, I learned from Dusty Crop Hopper. So, but this is a really interesting position. There are schools that are specifically devoted to training pilots for agricultural aviation. They'll do the flying piece, they'll do the knowledge piece. There are schools dedicated just to this section of aviation. And so what do ag pilots do? They spray farms and fields with fertilizers and chemicals to make sure that the crops grow. And then a lot of preparation is involved in this kind of a position. There's prep beforehand, there's post-operational reviews, and then there's usually a ground crew as well. And so you're working with the ground crew as well as with the aircraft and with all of the other aspects of spraying the fields and plants and things like that. And then of course we're talking about flying, so weather, you have to plan around weather. What's cool about this? Flying the airplane. I've spoken to a number of ag pilots, and there are few aircraft that are as powerful as agricultural airplanes, where you really feel the power. So that's a lot of fun. Striving for a job well done. He said, rarely can you do something that's perfect when you're spraying, but a job well done means you completed your assignment for that day, and then being part of helping people feed themselves and helping feed the country and the world is a great rewarding part of it as well. What's tough? Creating an environment for success and safety. So agricultural pilots are frequently only feet off the ground, so that you've got to pay very close attention to your surroundings and the position of the aircraft and things like that. So what does it take? You got to be a commercial pilot. I mentioned there are schools that are designated or devoted specifically to agricultural flight training. You often need to train as a journeyman and work under somebody else and get that experience. You need to have knowledge of the chemicals that you're using and how to safely handle them and how to make sure that they're not being mixed inappropriately. And then insurance companies may require some additional experience or currencies or things like that. So it's always important to make sure that you know what that insurance piece is going to look like.
Very cool. Thanks, Brian. And then I know we're moving on to this next one, aviation medicine, and I see lots of questions. We are going to stick around and answer questions. I know we're just trying to roll through. So I know Katie's going to talk about aviation medicine.
Aviation medicine, yeah. I mean, probably the most common job in aviation medicine, people think of AMEs, aeromedical examiners. Those are our doctors. Those are our folks that we go see to get our medicals every 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is for you. There's actually a lot of aviation medicine medical personnel at the FAA who are there to help you, dealing with medical conditions, reviewing standards, medical standards, and helping get people to that yes, like to get them their medical certificates and keep them in the air. So a very important function with the FAA. AOPA also has a whole room full of people that are there to help our members get and keep their medicals. They are experts. They are some of the most special people at AOPA, and they really do a fine job of keeping our members in the air. So lots of opportunities in aviation medicine.
And you don't necessarily have to be a doctor to do those either. So that's
right.
something I thought was
That's
interesting.
Right. Yep.
We're going to talk about professional pilots of this. I know Katie's going to talk about the airline part because she's done that in just a second here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about being a professional pilot. And this is just, we had several people that put it in. Obviously, we think of pilot in aviation. So this is that general aviation pilot. So this could be anything that does aircraft flying for general aviation services. So this is, I know somebody mentioned banner towing, skydiving, charter, freight, corporate. I flew freight myself and was also a flight instructor full-time for a couple of years. And so what you want to think about here is generally you're think of your cross countries, and that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing cross countries, but you're going to be taking cargo or passengers with you, or both, for money and getting paid to do it. And so it's, you get typically on a schedule, but sometimes not on a schedule. But the big thing is on either of them, it's normally not a 9-to-5 schedule if you're doing those. What's cool about it is you get to sometimes go to some pretty cool places. You get a really good view no matter where you're going. I've always enjoyed that. There's lots of great people you get to work with, and you really get super proficient. That's the big thing I do miss about that, is that I was really proficient because I was flying every day, and you're really sharp with what you do, and you get to fly some cool airplanes. What's tough about it? There's the weather. There's loading cargo or maybe sometimes passengers, occasional tech problems that come up, and it can be unstable work. And then probably the toughest thing is dealing with pressure to complete the mission. Sometimes it's self-induced, sometimes it could be from the company, but being that pilot in command and being able to say no, and hopefully having the support of your flight department. What does it take? Well, you need to have the appropriate pilot certificates, of course, and a medical. And the key thing here is the safety mindset. You do not want to get complacent because it's easy to do that. So fatigue, distraction, all that sort of stuff. And I'm going to make sure I wrap things up here. So that's basically it. So the problem solving idea. Let's keep moving so we can finish up. Well, it's me again. Military contract drone operator. What do? We have a gentleman actually that works here in our pilot information center that did this over in the Middle East. And he got the contract, and he said basically what they launched and operated the drones, obviously looking for IEDs and surveillance. What's cool, getting paid to go to interesting places where he did get to do that. He said the pay was nice too, which is why he did it. The schedule was a little rough, 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. So that was kind of a rough schedule. What does it take? In that case, it was pilot certificates. Of course, now we have drone operator certificates and things like that. Military experience was really helpful. And then being able to think on your feet and adjust. He said really actually operating the drone was only a little part of what they did, because they would launch it and then turn it over to somebody in the forward area who would operate it. And then they would then pass the drone back to them for landing and recovery. All right, Katie, aerial firefighting.
All right, one of my closest friends in life is an aerial firefighter. I live vicariously through him. If, flying corporate jets or flying for the airlines isn't for you, and that's the case for a lot of aerial firefighters, they find themselves, dropping slurry on fires. Varied days, right? Like you're either like full on or waiting around, waiting for a fire. And I think that's the thing. I talk to Jared all the time, and either I can't get a hold of him because he's flying like max number of hours and sorties missions a day, or he's sitting under the wing of the airplane waiting to get a phone call. So it's either channeling one or the other. But if you're okay with that, then maybe firefighting is for you. Super exciting, challenging environments, lots of adrenaline, being able to manage your fatigue, and being able to put up with those long duty days. Some stressful days sometimes is something that's very important to being a good aerial firefighter. You need a commercial pilot certificate generally. Jared is always, I'm always so jealous. I love to ski, so does Jared. He's flying all summer long. I don't see him at all, but then when I call him during the winter, he's like skiing. So it's a, you know, great if you like to, you're gonna work hard during fire season, but it also allows for some nice off time in the off season. Although one winter, you know, it's winter in the US or North America, but summer in, you know, the Southern Hemisphere. And Jared got to fly down to Australia. They contracted his company, Australia, the government of Australia contracted his company to fly fires in Australia over winter. So lots of cool opportunities in airline
Yeah, that's very cool. And the next one is also you, Katie, which I know you did, airline pilot.
Airline pilot, I was an airline pilot. Yeah, I think this is a pretty well understood career. So I know we're short of time, but you know, a lot of folks start as regional pilots, which is what I did, and build time and experience until they're able to go on to move up to a major airline. Seniority is a big thing for an airline pilot, right? The more senior you are, the better or easier it is to hold the schedule and the line and fly the aircraft that you want. A lot of pilots, as they get senior, they want those bigger airplanes, those long international cool trips. So you get to go to some super cool places. The downside of international flying, of course, is getting your body on a regular schedule and trying to keep it there and deal with those time zone changes and keeping that circadian rhythm in a good spot. A lot of senior pilots, they want to be home every night or just fly Monday through Wednesday, and they don't mind going to Tulsa on a 737 as the most senior pilot, you know, on the airplane that gets to pick exactly what days they're going to fly. So a lot of ways to manage an airline career to the best of your ability. I will say, I didn't really realize it till I left the airlines. I flew CRJ 200 for a regional carrier. One of the coolest things about being an airline pilot is when you shut the airplane down at the end of a trip, you walk away from it. You don't have to answer emails at night. No one's going to call you. Like, your time is your own as an airline pilot. You can walk away from the job, then before the next trip, get ready, put your head in the game, get packed up, and go on your next 4-day trip. You know, but when you're off, you're off. It's a great career for that.
Very cool. All right, well, that does bring us towards the part I wanted to wrap up. And by the way, by total planning and everything else, yesterday Flight Training Magazine came out, and it's got a thing on launch your career. So check out that current issue right at aopa.org, or if you get the subscription. But what have we learned today? Now, there was definitely, as I was going through and working and collecting all these things from the folks, I want to thank everybody that did submit for us as well. Some themes definitely came up. I think we saw lots of cool jobs, and I know we've got lots of questions, and I know Dan's going to hit us up with the questions. People were mentioning other jobs. Clearly, we're not able to talk about all of them, but I know that, but Katie and Brian and I think you guys will agree that we talked about pretty much anything that you do as a career. There is probably an aviation related career that goes with that. Even like classroom teacher, for instance, is one that I'm familiar with. We have an aviation program here at AOPA that schools will use, and it's like almost anything you can think of. There were big professional themes that I know that I saw, where things like risk management was a common theme, problem solving, budget and dealing with budget and time limits, that safety mindset and staying proficient. And then finally, that combination of being the PIC, which I've talked about on this show a whole bunch, but also being part of a team. I don't think anybody here mentioned anything about just being by themselves. It was always being part of a crew, part of a team, working with other people. So to that point, this is what I kind of took out. There's a link to this course on the handout, which is the Air Safety Institute's Do the Right Thing. And so this is just the print version. They have an online course as well. I think there's a link to it as well within that page. But they have some rules to live by. And what I really thought was cool is I kind of took them and I applied them to all the jobs that we just spoke about. So with the personal minimums contract, or having personal minimums, in a job or a career, you're doing that by exercising the fact of what's my core mission? What are the limits in which I should operate with? Leave yourself an out, be flexible, have that plan B, NC, ND, and whatever else you need. Be ready to change. Anticipate. So you got to be paying attention, avoid complacency in what you're doing. Pay attention to details. I know the attorneys talked about that a detail oriented, and of course we know in flying as well. Recognize it. Be truthful with yourself, recognize that something has happened and do something about it, which is the next one. So make sure that you act, make a positive change to make things better than they were. Determine your priorities. And several of the folks, the CEO, I think I mentioned that, and several of the other folks mentioned having the priority so you know what you need to do now versus what needs to happen later, and being able to determine what the best course of action is currently. And of course, we talked about this last episode too, the idea of evaluating. Think about how can I improve the situation. So what I want to do is we're going to officially close the webinar, but then we're going to stick around for questions. And I know Dan's got a bunch, and if you have other questions or if you have other things you want to ask, and you know a little bit of background about what each of us has done, so feel free to ask those questions. Dan, you want to take us out for the official end here?
Yeah, absolutely. This was really informative. We do have some great questions to go through. I've been able to categorize several of them, so we'll be able to kind of stay on topic here moving forward. But wanted to make that pitch for AOPA, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. If you are not yet a member, we encourage you to do so. Be a part of the world's largest aviation community. AOPA has a resilient team to help advocate for general aviation at the national level, state level, local level as well. And we encourage you to do that. In addition to being able to keep your finger on the pulse of general aviation through our publications and newsletters, just like in aviation jobs. If you've got a niche in aviation, we probably have a product service or team that's dedicated to serving that. So your membership there supports that. And also regarding membership, just got an email yesterday and a press release. A whole new set of member benefits, discounts, and savings came through. Aerospace Reports, Aircraft Spruce, Assured Partners, Sirius XM, Jeppesen Pilot Workshops, Avis Rental Cars, Enterprise Rental Cars, Hertz Rental Cars, JS Firm, Sporty's Pilot Shop, Aeroverse, Budget Truck Rental, Flight Outfitters, iFlight Planner, King Schools, Method 7, Sunglasses, N-Flight Cam Products and Services, FedEx, Partnership, Tanis, Preheaters, and Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. So all of that stuff is new in addition to the benefits, services, discounts that you can already get as an AOPA member. So lots of great stuff happening, tremendous value as an AOPA member. To join, please visit us at aopa.org/membership.
Dan, there's almost too much to list. I can't even remember all those benefits.
That was a long email.
That was a long one.
That was like a 4-pager if you printed it out, but great stuff. Great value for an AOPA member for sure.
Hey, and just a little heads up for next time, we are doing one of our most popular type of topics, which is air traffic control. So if you want to join us next October 17th, Thursday, as always, 12 to 1 Eastern. And we paid attention to detail this time. There are no errors on this slide this time, Dan. We really worked on that, making sure the comma was in the right place.
I am so proud of all of you.
But our topic is going to be our topic is going to be going off menu, the in and outs of getting great ATC service. So what we've actually asked them to do, you get it?
I see what you did there. I see what you did there.
But what we've done is we have Rebecca Collins coming back again, and we've asked them, instead of just doing the Ask the ATC thing, instead what we're going to do is one of our Santosh, one of our really regular listeners, mentioned this topic, and he said, what about doing like their best tips for getting good service out of ATC? What are the secret things maybe, or the right things to ask for? And that's what they're going to do for us. So we're going to get that. So that's why we came up with that topic. All right, Dan. Let's hit us up with some questions. And by the way, if you were here for Wings Credit, you're good. As long as you were here live, all you had to do is give us that email or register with the email that you use on FAAsafety.gov. So you were good to go, but we're sticking around and we're going to give you even better answers right now. Let's go.
Yeah, great. So a great question came in right towards the end of basically of the many jobs that the team had spoken about today. Are there some that are more in demand or soon to be more in demand than others that we can think of?
That's a good question. What are the hot ones? Katie?
Well, one of the things we didn't talk about was electric aviation. The last real age that we had of aviation was the jet age, and now we are on the brink of the electric age. There's so much work going on right now in electric, hybrid electric technologies, aviation, eVTOLs, you name it. There's some really cool opportunities coming out in the eVTOL space and the hybrid electric space. So I think, and it's everything from pilots to engineers to operations folks figuring out and building vertiports. I mean, there's going to be a whole new, low altitude airspace system probably to accommodate these types of aircraft and, advanced air mobility. So lots of cool opportunities, I think, coming in advanced air mobility. AAM is what a lot of people call it.
Very cool. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Like that's right on.
Awesome. A lot of questions for older members, listeners, watchers, those that are retired, also those that are a little bit older. I'll just kind of work through them quickly. Right off the bat, anything working in aviation for older people such as retirees. That kind of summed up a couple of them. Any thoughts from the panel here?
Okay,
Go for it, Katie.
I love the idea of wise seasoned pilots going back and instructing our next generation of pilots.
It's a great thing
It's
to
not
do.
something you have to do full time, but even if you take 1 or 2 primary students, at a time, or be willing to do some biennial flight reviews or IPCs, and I think it's so cool when we have seasoned professional pilots and seasoned recreational pilots come back and teach the next generation. And we know our flight schools need more good, instructors that may not go off to the airlines. We totally get that instructors are building time to go to the airlines, right? It's kind of a progression that happens in our industry. There's nothing wrong with that. But so it's super cool when those folks can come back later and be a great stable instructor at a flight school. And we also mentioned like being a high school teacher, right? We've got all hundreds of schools around the country are using AOPA's curriculum. They need people to go back and teach aviation and supplement those teachers in those schools depending on how the school is set up. So I think lots of cool opportunities for folks that are later in their aviation career.
Another thing too that I think of, oh, sorry, Chris.
Go ahead, Brian.
But one of the things too is a lot of smaller municipal airports don't need a full-time airport manager. They only need somebody who's there part-time. And so if you've already finished one career and you're looking for something else to kind of take your time, and you have a few small airports around, that might be something you could look into as well, because not all airport managers are there 9 to 5. It could just be a few days a week that you need, and that gets you over to the airport and gets you interacting with the pilots and maintenance shops and things like that are in the aviation industry still.
And I was going to add on to what Katie was mentioning as well, is that if you've got that experience too, even think of just the part of mentoring CFIs and training the new CFIs, because that's a big part. I know that the hirings, like for the airline, the sort of that craziness has subsided just a little bit right now, but still having that person that can give that some of that experience to the new CFIs and help them. And if you're a teacher too, same thing, get your CFI and then teach them how to teach, because that's a big part of it as well. So I think those are a lot of opportunities there.
Cool. One of our viewers today just came back from a trip to Victoria, British Columbia, and his wife says that he should take early retirement and fly charter or air taxi seaplanes up there. Any ideas on ratings, commercial or ATP, and the hours needed? And he did mention that he has not yet done the research, but anything that we could provide for guidance would be greatly appreciated.
Katie, I saw you jump right away. Go ahead.
Well, I laugh because later in my career, I'm going to fly bush planes in Alaska in the summer and fly seaplanes in the Maldives in the winter. Like, so
Love it.
I love this guy. We're totally thinking the same thing, right? Yeah. So, I mean, go for it, right? I mean, I think every airline probably is a little bit different. If you're in British Columbia, you're going to need to be if you're a U.S. registered pilot or U.S. rated pilot, you're going to need to be thinking about getting Canadian ratings and those sorts of things. So those are something to consider, right? Because that has to happen unless you're flying an N-registered aircraft up there. But it's probably very similar. I mean, you're gonna fly, if you're flying paying passengers, you're gonna need a commercial certificate for the most part. Hours is probably gonna be based on the type of flying you're doing. It's probably gonna be as much managed by their insurance and their insurance requirements than it is gonna be by regulation.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, and don't forget medical too. So be thinking about your medical as well. Probably at least a second class in the U.S. Not sure how Canada does that, but yeah. Yep. And then if you need to get an airplane, Brian can help you out with that.
There you go.
That's right. We can finance you an airplane.
Excellent. Look at all the positive work we're getting done here today. This is great. Speaking of positive work, from someone who's a bit older, don't necessarily have engineering and aviation degrees, but other degrees perhaps, but they do have 10, 20, 30 years of work experience in the industry or peripheral. How do they get attention of those aviation type jobs? How can they get the attention of managers who are hiring for these jobs if they don't have necessarily those industry specific, but they're looking to make a radical change?
Probably, I would think networking, and Katie's probably gonna have some really good ones here too, but I would definitely think networking. I know I can tell from example here at AOPA, we have a gentleman that works here, Eric Webb. You may have seen him on social media, and the way that he ended up getting in was just going and volunteering at AOPA fly-ins, and then they got to know him and they were like, hey, we like this guy. and they brought him on, and he's actually had several different jobs here within AOPA, both in outreach, I know, working with you, Dan, and then now in social media. So I would say go find the folks where you want to work and start getting to know them, and then figure that out. Katie or Brian?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, networking is such a huge thing. When I got furloughed from the airline, I was like, oh, what do I do next, right? I didn't really want to go back to the airlines. And so I was based in DC, and I started working the network, and through my Embry-Riddle network, I found a role at the General Aviation Manufacturers Association doing public relations. Now, I don't know much about not much. I didn't know anything about public relations or media relations at that time. But one of the things I think I love so much about having a career in aviation is you are gaining crazy awesome soft skills, right? Teamwork, decision making, operating, under crisis or under stress. Like, those are things that you think are very specific to flying, but it's actually really awesome life skills that apply to almost every job, and every employer wants those skills. Those are things that they can't really teach, you just need to have. And pilots have them in spades, exactly. And so you may think, well, I went to school, I have this degree in aeronautical science, and I'm a pilot, and that's all I've been. I really can't do anything else. That is not true. You are very, very marketable and very attractive to a lot of different jobs, to a lot of different employers. So just don't sell yourself short.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One other thing too is just real quick, that a lot of people do mention, a lot of job listings might mention a degree required, but if you've got a number of years of experience and you focus on that experience, the requirement for a degree is more of a preference than a necessity in a lot of cases.
Speaking of job listings, any popular websites or services that we could direct our viewers to look for some of these awesome aviation jobs?
I'm thinking like, AOPA, I know we've got a career listing on AOPA's website.
Job board.
So yeah, we have both the one for AOPA, says join the team for AOPA jobs, but then there's the job board for other jobs that are listed out. NAFI, the National Association of Flight Instructors, has one for flight instructor jobs. Climb to 350 is one. I think you have to pay for that one. And Katie and Brian, you might know some of the other ones too, but I know Indeed you might see things listed there. Do you guys have any other ideas on other ones?
JS Firm has been a good source.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, I stole it from you.
That's okay. I had it up here. I was ready to go. JS
there you
Firm.
go.
They're great.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with them. Abby
Yeah.
does a great job at getting people connected.
A lot of the other associations have job sites too, like NBA, National Business Aviation Association, especially if you're interested in a role in business aviation. They've got a lot of resources as well.
Mm-hmm. Any other resources? A question, statement/question from a friend of ours back in Kentucky. How can AOP members find employment at any age? It seems as people are getting more senior in their years, there's more difficulty finding opportunity there. Any more advice we could provide those groups? It seems like networking is a big piece there. Staying at the airport, being active. Anything else we could recommend for that age group?
I think the volunteering aspect is as a networking part, but then also volunteering and having them get to know you. For example, I'm thinking of Les, who used to work here with us, that now he now volunteers down at the National Air and Space Museum. I don't think he necessarily wants to go back to working. He's good now that he's retired, but I have no doubt that if he wanted a job there, he's got all these other qualifications that he had before as an engineer and other things that he could easily move into something there. So I think that idea of volunteering is, again, I go back to that with Eric, who was relatively young when he was doing that and able to get the job here at AOPA as a result. So I think that volunteering and networking are probably the key things.
Mm-hmm. One of the viewers wrote in and said, I'm 57 years old, just retired with my PPL in about 120 hours. Is it too late for me to get into an aviation career? Particularly interested in a small float plane operation or ag pilot job. Is it too late for a 57-year-old?
Nope.
No,
definitely not.
Yeah, you got the qualifications. Oh, hey, I was remiss. We have one thing on the handout I wanted to mention. There's the Society of Flight Test Engineers is having a conference that one of our listeners wanted to promote. So just check that out on the handout. Check out that link. Might be something you're interested in attending out in California. Go ahead.
Great. So related to pilot jobs, some jobs that came up about experimental, developmental, production, operational, maintenance, test pilots are all opportunities in the pilot field. And a question from another: do regional airlines accept commercial pilots with less than 1,500 hours total time under their belts? What else could be great flying jobs to build experience in the U.S.?
Do you guys know I know there's like the restricted ATP that's a little less than
Yeah,
1,500. It's like
there are
1,250 if
some.
I'm not mistaken.
If you go through certain programs or certain universities, they can lower that 1,500-hour requirement. So there are ways to do it under 1,500 hours. But again, you've got to research that in advance and make sure you're in the right program or you're at the right school to qualify for those lower hour requirements.
Another opportunity there, flight test engineer. So that could be a very exciting and rewarding career opportunity there. On the tech side, a note came in that said, I'm a technical program manager, which is tangential to the digital product manager role. My background has engineering and project management certifications involved. Other than ForeFlight, I'm finding it hard to even find positions like this. Any other technical companies and roles that one can transfer in from where one has software development as a background? Yes, Katie.
I would look at companies like Joby and Archer, those companies that are building eVTOL aircraft and hybrid electric programs. I mean, they're hiring so many people right now, and the jobs they have are, a lot of them aren't necessarily aviation specific background, right? It's like software engineers and program managers and those sorts of things that you're working for an aviation company, but you don't necessarily have to have like an aviation background to do those jobs, and most of them aren't. I mean, they're most tech jobs. It's a tech company, right? It happens to be doing aviation stuff. So yeah, check out those eVTOL companies. There's a lot of them in the US, a lot of startups, and they're building and growing pretty fast.
And just to throw out there too, I know the simulator companies like Redbird and other folks that make those, they use a lot. It's all computer programming and yeah. So.
All right, on the legal front, we had talked a bit about aviation attorneys. A question came in about who do these attorneys work for? Is it the government or is it private firms, solo practitioners that work in aviation too? How does that all work? Where can lawyers find a home in aviation?
That's an interesting question because it varies, So here at AOPA, we have our legal services plan through our Pilot Protection Services membership. So there are some that actually work here at AOPA and specialize in aviation law. But we also have a nationwide panel of attorneys that specialize in aviation law, but don't work necessarily for an aviation law firm. They simply have that specialty in aviation law. And so you could work for your own firm, you could work for somebody else's firm, and as long as you have that aviation specialty, you can market that and provide services to people who need that. So it could go either way. One of the other areas that is helpful there is on the contracts and buying side of the aircraft. There are CPA firms, tax attorneys, and other firms like that, financial firms that have aviation divisions, because a lot of companies own aircraft and use them for business purposes, and so aviation law is important there. A lot of people, when they buy their aircraft, they're looking for tax advantages and savings and the appropriate corporate or ownership structure, and so aviation attorneys are really helpful in all of those types of firms as well.
There was an interesting video too when I was doing the research for this. It was on YouTube, and I think I just Googled or looked on YouTube for aviation attorney or aviation careers. But there's a lady on there that had gone to school, got her law degree, and it was like transportation. She was she specialized in aviation, but was a transportation attorney, and so she did all the contracts and everything too. So I think there's a lot there. You just got to dig down.
Yeah.
Awesome. Regarding maintenance and inspection, that it's not just FAA inspectors, that there's a lot of opportunities in the private sector. One viewer wrote in and said, I am the internal version of an FAA inspector for the airlines. Essentially, we do the same thing as the FAA inspectors do, but at the airline themselves. So there's more job opportunity there than one may think. With general business, don't forget about procurement, executing calls for bids or proposals. One was head of procurement for a NATO civilian organization. So lots to be done in procurement in general aviation, and also consulting, for instance, providing financial solutions for aviation businesses. Having that expertise and specialty in aviation can take you a long ways in consulting for businesses. Here's a question about general aviation, not general aviation, but aviation generally, supporting that. Any thoughts on being a flight dispatcher? What does that look like?
Sure. Do you guys, I know I had one at the company I worked at. Katie, I imagine you did no, okay.
Well, yeah, the airline had them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like I know that I was familiar with the guy that did it for us. He worked in I worked for a freight company, and so he would stay at our base. We had a base in Phoenix. We had bases all over the place, but our base in Phoenix. And so basically his job was he was there in the morning. He would get all the airplanes sorted out. He would know what routes were being flown. He would coordinate the stuff with the ground crew, and then dispatch the airplanes out to go cover the routes that needed. And for the most part, we were a scheduled 135 operator, which was kind of unusual. But then we also had specials where there'd be other things that would pop up, and he would then arrange the crew or the plane and the pilot to go take care of those when those happen. Then I'm trying to remember. I think he was there for the most day. He may go home in the middle of the day, but then he was back there in the evening when we were coming back in, and then checking all the planes back in and everything else. So there's a rating I know that you can get, and I'm sure that the airline is probably just taking that and ramping it up. Versus what he was doing. So.
Yeah, NBAA has a great program, a dispatch certification program. And airlines, I mean, we talk to those dispatchers all the time. We got to know them on a first name basis. They were super helpful to us. Some of my favorite people at the airline was our dispatchers. I mean, because they do the great work, they do all the hard work, the dirty work for you before the flight. But they're the folks that help get you out of a bind, whether it's weather or we need to take on more fuel and where are we going to get it. I mean, they're just awesome people, and they're problem solvers. So we relied on our dispatchers a lot, have a lot of respect for dispatchers.
Part of the team, the whole team thing. Yep.
So we talked a lot about taking a leap of faith and moving from one career to another and working full time. What about part-time opportunities? I mean, CFI is an obvious one that can be done. Any other part-time gigs that we'd want to recommend or open eyes and minds to?
The one thing that I can think of is what I started out doing is aerial photography. That doesn't have to be a full-time job. If you've got some extra time and you want to drum up some business doing aerial photography, lots of people like photos of their properties, of their buildings, of their projects, the construction progress, the shots, things like that, or events even. And you don't even have to be in an airplane. You could do this as a drone operator. You could do this from other types of aircraft. Hot air balloons is one that we've seen, that I've seen before. So that can be done part-time. That's an option.
Cool.
Yeah, obviously flight instruction too. The attorneys, I believe too, they don't have to do that full-time. They may do it just part-time as part of their other practice. I think the doctors, I remember some of the AMEs that I used to go to, and the guy in Arizona that everybody liked to go to, he just did it out of his house. And I think it was kind of a part-time thing, just doing FAA medicals. So you probably can make that work in almost anything, I would guess.
Good. Well, I think we captured the questions well through that discussion there. If anybody has questions that they didn't feel was answered to the full, or new questions pop up, please feel free to email us at ftinitiative@aopa.org, ftinitiative@aopa.org, and be happy to help get you there. But I would say that's about it. Chris, Katie, Brian?
Hey, thanks everybody for being here. Katie and Brian, really appreciate you guys, especially for taking the time to do this with us. So, and of course, don't forget, next episode, October 17th, 2024, going off menu, the in and outs for getting great ATC service. And the one thing I'll leave you with too is don't forget all those skills. I want to just double down on what Katie said too. The skills that we've learned as pilots, the stuff that we've learned is to be safe, helps us in anything that we do. So it really does change the way that we think. And of course, I know that we didn't cover every possible topic. Check out that FAA document and go Google things. You'll be surprised at how much there is. Obviously, we could not cover all of it, even in an hour.
Yep.
So anyway.
One that did pop up in the 11th hour here that we didn't talk much about at all was opportunities through the military. Lots of aviation opportunities through military. So certainly something to look into on that front that could lead to an incredible career in aviation.
And another one at the last minute here, Cliff says Embry-Riddle's got an aviation English program to teach pilot trainees to improve their English when it's not primarily English. So, I mean, like anything you can think of, it's there. It's crazy.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
All right, let's go ahead and sign off, everybody. Hey, I want to thank you so much for being here. Hopefully we'll see you back on October 17th. And until then, we hope you have a great day.
Good luck, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.